Hello and welcome to the Bowling University studio from the International Bowling Campus in Arlington, Texas. This is the Profit Break. If you're joining us for the first time, we're glad you're here. Give us 15 minutes and you'll be well on your way to improving yourself and your profitability. If you have a game room, you know what an important contributor it is to your location, the guest experience, and your bottom line. But just like any other product you serve, you have to price it appropriately and strategically for your target audience and your brand. So if you're wondering what's the best and most effective way to price your games, come to the right place today. To help guide us down that path of showing just how powerful pricing can be is George McAuliffe. George should be no stranger to you as he's a frequent guest speaker at national conferences, Bowling University management schools, and the Profit Break, and has tremendous experience in this field. His company, the Pinnacle Entertainment Group, is a leading FEC and redemption arcade consulting firm for our industry. So, George, welcome back. Thanks for joining us again and taking time out of your busy schedule.
Hey, thank you, John. It's always nice to be here. Nice to be in the world of bowling.
Woohoo. So let's talk about pricing here and what makes pricing. We're talking about game room. Everybody talks about pricing when it comes to bowling and your food and beverage and so on. But what makes it so powerful when it comes to games?
Well, I think you start with, the two. If you go to Disney Institute or you talk to people in the world of amusement parks, attractions, and I think this goes for bowling centers and certainly for bowling entertainment centers. But you want to manage two things well. One is length of stay, how long the experience takes for your guests. And second is repeat visitation. If you get them back, the more you get them back, the better your business. So starting with that big picture, today's pricing in the arcade, we'll talk about the cashless systems in a second, but they allow you to regulate that and particularly with length of stay. So there's several elements, and this dial here illustrates the elements involved. One is the pricing at the point of sale, how you present your pricing options to the guest, and that's where they're going to put their money on the card. Secondly is game pricing, individual game and attraction pricing. That's where we take the money off the card. And then there's a couple of wild cards. There are specials and added values that the card systems allow us to deliver. And speaking of card systems, today, I've said before, probably on previous Profit Breaks, I've been in the arcade business 43 years now, and the card system is the best thing that ever happened to the industry for a lot of the reasons I just gave you, but also because it's so flexible, and it gets more flexible every time we turn around. We just came from the IAPA show not too long ago, and we saw some of the new card system technology. So we have pricing at the teller, we have handhelds, we have wristbands, we have all kinds of readers with RFID, tap technology, mobile pay. All of that is part of what goes into how you interact with your customers, how you can present the value to them, and that goes to pricing.
Gone are the days, I guess it used to be where you put a quarter in, that was it. That was it for the day, that was it for the night. Now with this technology, it's so powerful, not just for you, as you said, being able to control your pricing by day part and so on, but for your guests too, as far as convenience. So it's really a great tool. And the only problem I find with card systems is they're so powerful, it's figuring out, okay, how do I use it to its advantage? So with that being said, and with all the card systems becoming more and more prevalent, the technology getting newer all the time, are there any trends that you've noticed out there in price management with card systems?
There are a bunch. In Profit Break, you like to keep it short and sweet and right to the point. So I'll try to do that and just maybe highlight one or two of the big ones, and then we can touch on a few of the others. But, the simplest, lowest hanging fruit, you talked about the days of the quarter. Well, back when we had quarters, if you wanted to raise the price, when an arcade game average price was a quarter, if you wanted to raise the price, you had to go to 50 cents. You had to have 100% increase. Today, we have much more flexibility. This is kind of the old model of, built around $20 bills. Today, we're taking in 75 to 80% of sales on credit cards. So we're not tied to that $20 bill. So we've had a huge success with our clients in migrating everybody from we call it the $20 preset price point to 25. Let me back up a little bit. Most systems have these not the slide necessarily. Yeah. So most systems have these preset price points, and there's usually 6. Different systems maybe have different quantities, but with these 6, these are suggested pricing. So when I'm talking about pricing, what I'm suggesting here, going from 20 to 25, is not necessarily a price increase, where it's just a change in the suggested pricing. Now, the good news is with most of our customers, these price points that you see on the screen, whatever they happen to be, the 6 preset price points, account for 90% of the sales. So people just go with what you suggest. So what we're saying is, if you're still at 20 as your first go-to bonus price point, raise it to 25. And let me show you what that can do for you. So here's a recent case study where we did just that. If you look at the top, 4 weeks before, we had 44% of our transactions were at the $20 price point. We raised that to 25. Now, by the way, through any amount, you can always buy a $20 ticket, and you can always, card, and you can always buy a $25 card. So in the 4 weeks before, these 1% of transactions at $25, those were done through the any amount. The preset price point was $20, 44% of transactions. Look down into the 2 weeks after. And we just did this recently with a number of locations, as you see here. And in the 2 weeks after, the $20 price point dropped to 9%, but the $25 price point picked up 30%. Maybe more to the point, if you look at our average transaction, and slide back up for a second, please. No, not slide, but roll up. I want to see the average transaction before.
Right here? There we go.
Yeah, it was in the first location to your left was $21, 21 and change. We got it up to 22, 26 just with that one move. So that's the average transaction across the thousands of transactions in the location that day. And if we were to go across, you'll see that most of the time we were able to raise the transaction. So if we pop now to the next slide. So what does that mean? So let's just take an arcade that grosses $500,000. If the average transaction was $24.81 and we did 20,000 transactions, if we're able to achieve an average transaction difference of plus 97 cents, which is what our examples there showed, then we just added almost $20,000 to our gross sales in a year. And that's 4% of sales. Now, remember, we didn't raise the price. We just changed the suggested price point.
Well, and you know what I think is interesting there too, correct me if I'm wrong, but just because you change the suggested price point doesn't mean that that guest can't choose their own price point, right? If
Absolutely.
They just don't get the value. So you're right, that is powerful. That is an increase without just giving them an increase, but they're getting more value, so it's a win-win. Yeah,
And
that's
that's really what it's all about. If you don't deliver a high perceived value, which is really at the end of the day a real value, there's no smoke and mirrors here. They got to have a lot of fun and feel that it's worth it.
yeah, that is great, and I love the fact that you've got hard data to show exactly what you're talking about there. So it's certainly meaningful. That's a I can think of a lot of things to do with $20,000 extra dollars in incremental sales.
And that's just that one tweak.
Right, just $5. I mean, is it
Yep.
unheard of that some people will go even more five, make that first one 30 or 40 or?
Yeah, and I'm gonna make
Okay.
show you how that looks in a second.
Okay. All right. So, and you talked about, I guess, a key word there is the average transaction, right? And what came to my mind was food and beverage, restaurant. They're always talking about average ticket and so on. So that's exactly what we're talking about with the games, right? What's the average transaction for each of my purchases? That kind of where you're going with that?
Yeah, great point. The analogy is a really good one. The reason why restaurants manage the average check so closely is because they only have so many seats and so many hours in the day. So if you're doing that in that business, you're talking about capacity utilization. So if we can get the average check up by delivering better value, like you just alluded to, we're really trying to do the same thing in the arcade. I started out by talking about regulating, the length of stay, and that goes to that average transaction, limited capacity, peak periods on a Saturday. All of those things kind of come together around that.
Well, and the benefits go beyond just your games, right? When you're talking about length of stay, you're talking about food, you're talking about bar. Okay, so it goes beyond there. So there's a lot of benefits that don't even show on this. And I noticed on your slide there that where we're talking about this location started at 30. So
yeah, these are, this is I thought somewhere on here it told us where this was.
Summit. It's
The Summit.
kind of behind
there you
there.
go.
Yeah.
So this is our friend Don McBrain,
Yep.
who subsequently sold to Main Event, but this is where he went and brought his average transaction up significantly higher than what we're used to seeing by starting out at 30 for his first bonus point, and then giving healthy bonuses at 50, putting that $75 suggested point in there is another way to look at it. So, because if you do go from 20 to 25, or I think I have a slide coming up, John. Let's take one more spin here.
Right here. Talking about pricing tools.
No, you know what? We touched on it and I failed to make the point, but here we go. Thank you. You see here, we don't have a $5 purchase. We're starting at 10. So by dropping that $5 purchase point and maybe adding in a 75, that again is going to help us drive the average transaction. When you're looking at the 5s and the 10s, those tend to be mostly utilized for recharges.
Okay.
So they can still do a 5, as you pointed out, through the purchase other, but the 10 is going to help support that higher average transaction.
Well, you know what I love here too in your examples, on the one we just saw, the highest purchase on this was $100. But then when you looked at the second example you gave where they had gone to 30, their top spend is $250.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That is and best value. So they're really drawing your eye to it. You get a $100 bonus. So you're right. It is all about
Absolutely.
that. That's amazing. It is powerful, very powerful. So great example, George. Thanks. How about here? What other kind of pricing tools do we have on with card systems and such?
Well, this is probably a big one. This would take probably more time than we have, but talk to your card system provider and understand the options on. Some call it power charge, some call it supercharge. It's an additional upsell tool,
Okay.
besides the basic preset price points. So that let's say you buy a $7 card, your power charge or your supercharge could will pop up and say, hey, for a few dollars more, you can get much more value. So take a look at that and talk to your provider about that.
Great marketing right there for that. Great. All right, we got time for one more question. Early on, we talked about the quarter example. We talked about when you go up in 25 cents, you had to go up 50 cents.
Right.
It kind of leads to some of the things we've been hearing about a lot in our industry and other industries, too, dynamic pricing. Can you talk about that and how that can impact the arcade space?
Sure. Dynamic pricing, it's a little bit of a misnomer in our world because I'm not aware of any system that, has the algorithms to sense the traffic on Saturday afternoon and adjust pricing the way airlines do, for example. But what we mean when we say dynamic pricing in the arcade is really peak and off-peak pricing. So you can really consider that when you're jammed on a weekend, it's supply and demand at its, most basic. You might consider setting your peak pricing a little bit different than your off-peak pricing. So that's the basic answer to your question.
Okay.
There's other things we can do, and again, you just said this is the last question. I'm going to keep it brief, just give you some things to think about. But charging for cards, there's pros and cons. There's two schools of thought on it. The big, on the one hand, people think that why introduce what could be perceived as a negative on the front end of the transaction and the guest experience. Some people charge for cards and give bonus in the same amount to mitigate that. I was in that camp. I recently questioned my own assumptions and did some data work for a client where I'm hard pressed to say it's a bad idea. So I'm moving over into that camp of charging for cards. But take a look at it. Pricing at the game, I think we've kind of talked about this, but it's really managing throughput. So if you do have a peak pricing scheme, you're going to be putting more people through more games quicker. The other thing that gets debated a lot, particularly when we set up a new client, is should we set up with cash or credits? If you look at that reader, it's expressing itself in cash. Others believe in doing it in credits. If you were a 25-cent base credit, then instead of $21, it would be 84 credits. Some people, like Dave & Buster's famously, believes in creating a whole different world of currency so that your customers, people think they don't know what they spend. I'm not so sure about that. I think certainly when they get the credit card bill or at the end of the experience, they kind of know what they spent. But either way, cash versus credits, we have clients that do both. I'm hard pressed to find data that says one is better than the other, but there are schools of thought out there, so you'll come to your own conclusions. The last thing I'll just mention is time play. The big guys, certainly Intercard, has a robust time play capability that can work in some systems are either or. It's got to be time play at certain times or for certain groups of cards like parties. But Intercard is, we think, among the most flexible for time play in particular. So you can give a lot of value to groups and events in particular.
Well, you know what? Sure, I mean, you're right. It is very powerful. And all the different layers that you just mentioned at the end there, There's so much to squeeze into 10 or 15 minutes, so thanks for touching on all of it. Unfortunately for you, we're probably going to have to ask you to come back and go through. I mean, you could spend a whole episode just on cash versus credit, because you're right, that's a common question that gets answered. So stay tuned, we're going to call you back again. But thank you for just kind of giving us a great overview of all the options and how powerful it can be. I love that data, thank you for that. So our guests out there, if you'd like to learn more about how to price your game room and maximize the guest experience and the profitability, you can reach directly out to George at, you see his number and his information on the screen. If you're ready to start improving your center's profitability now, you can reach out to us at any time at education@bpaa.com. And as we wrap up another edition of the Profit Break, remember that when your focus is on growing people, people will grow your business. This episode, as well as all our previous Profit Break episodes, are available 24/7 for you and your team at bowlinguniversity.net. Plus, new episodes are available every month, so mark your calendar, watch your email, and join us on Facebook to hear about the latest episodes. Until then, I'm John Karabatsis, and do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. We'll see you next time. So long.